topic, and of course we should tell people what the topic is. We are talking about bringing people under the tree, and Sarah has of course suggested the topic. So Sarah, please, if you can take us through and then we'll get into the discussion.
I look forward to it. Thank you for this opportunity to talk to the global community of mediators and peacemakers. The topic I'm talking to you all about today is bringing parties under the tree. You're probably curious about that title, and the genesis really was, it started from how do we bring people to the table, bringing people back to the table. But I do a lot of cross-cultural work, and a lot of my work isn't just in the boardroom and around the table. It is out and about. It is sitting under the tree. It is being where people are. And Vikram and I were talking about how do we make sure we're authentic to that, the potency of meeting people where they are. So I had the privilege of attending another conference today. It's been a really busy day. And I was listening to Aloysius Ko from Singapore. And he said this beautiful quote that I wanted to share with you all, really to set the scene, that mediators can create bridges between people's spirits. And I thought, what a beautiful way and what a beautiful sentiment to start our session, that we are all carrying a responsibility for creating those bridges between people. And we do this by starting with ourselves, because we can't possibly bring people in conflict together if we first don't have the confidence to plant our feet in the soil, in the earth, and hold this space with an authentic authority. What I found really interesting about the conversation as it progressed this morning was that a panel was discussing mediation and diplomacy. And all of the presenters shared a really common theme, which is relevant for today. They said things like, we can't separate people from the issues. And they said things like, it's about our personal connections, our ability to connect with humanity and the complexities of emotions, culture, interests, those messy human things that bring us to conflict. And it's there, our courage in a way to step into that space that makes us as mediators able to help parties transform their conflict. The talk about peacemaking is really interesting because I think the most powerful interventions occur when we balance both the structure or the process of mediator and the flexibility and responding to the flexibility, that requirement for the people human need, the cultural needs. Jawad, you talked earlier about making the influence of culture on decision-making. And in mediation, if we neglect those aspects that inform how we make decisions, then we really are making the process of mediation, of decision-making, less than it could be. So it's our capacity to listen and listen deeply, to design a meaningful process that isn't just that stock standard follow these steps, but really design an authentic process that has meaning under the tree as much as it does in the boardroom, that will enable us to help parties reach a legitimate decision. We also have to be able to adjust, to pivot, to dance with the song of people. For those of you that are mediators, you would know that dance of conflict resolution. There is movement to it. There's highs and there's lows. And as mediators, we have to be able to adjust and allow and listen to those moments of transformation. It is really bringing people, their emotions, their complexities, their interests, their cultures, their concerns to the table, not letting it overwhelm the process, but valuing it in balance. It's that thing about when we reach this point of balance, that we reach a place of calm, of clarity, and wise decision-making. In fact, Yi Ming spoke at this conference this morning that it is all about our personal connections. And she said that you can't run away from those personal connections in this messy business of conflict. Because behind the scenes of a mediation process, we are all human. In our delightful highs, in our messy lows, in our rational, in our emotional. And it's our ability to relate and manage these issues. Those are the things that allow us to transform conflict. She says that we as mediators need to be less afraid of these human issues, and I can't agree with her more. I see this veneer of control that many lawyers and mediators, lawyer mediators, adopt when confronted with the emotions of parties in conflict, when they're confronted with cultural diversity, when they're confronted with lots of challenges. And my little son is just interrupting. I'm on a video call and I can't talk.
You're on video call without your clothes. You can't do that. This is a family show. It's okay, Sarah. Let him. If we can take care, not a problem at all.
I love kids. I'm sorry, that was my son interrupting the flow of my presentation. But do you know what? That's an example of us being in the moment and being real to where our parties are at, and this online world that we're all engaging in. This is what it means to be people in this space. Exactly. So let me try to get my thoughts back online. Along those notions of being less afraid, we as mediators need to be able to respond to those moments, right? We need to be able to not panic and to hold this space well, because that allows our parties to become grounded themselves. That allows them to shift from the high reactive emotion of conflict into a space that is much more calm. So I love those things, and I love the need and the messaging that I'm hearing across the globe in all my networks about the need for cultural curiosity in the dispute resolution process. It's our ability to learn and design processes that meet the needs of people. Remember, the law is a mechanism for us to make decisions, but it's the people that drive and live it. So what does this mean for us? How do we lean into the process of bringing people together? Does it actually matter? And how do we build those bridges? So what does it mean to bring people together when they're in conflict? How often do we as mediators reflect on this? When we're dealing with people in conflict, emotions are high. There's issues of safety and concern. There's issues of legitimacy and authority. People in conflict actually need structure. It sounds counterintuitive, but the structure creates a stability. They know what's coming next. And when they know what's coming next, they're better able to focus on the problem solving. But the structure can't be so strong and focused that it loses the essence of flexibility. So we as mediators are holding people in this duality of structure and flexibility, legitimacy, safety, and emotions. People are feeling nervous. They are struggling to understand, how do we get through this mess? As mediators, we need to be both structured and creative. You know, so we need to follow the laws and the authorizing structures that give us authority, but we can't dismiss this need for creativity, because that allows us again to tap into the humanity of conflict. And as we design process, we need to address not just the transactional or standard requirements, but also the requirements of people, emotions, culture, the how of what they do in the decision-making process, less the what. And it really starts with us as mediators. It's our capacity to really listen deeply, listen to our own assumptions, listen to what they can't vocalize about what they need in decision-making. Listen to what's underlying this conflict and what they might need to resolve it well. This matters because when people feel safe and valued and listened to, when their basic human needs are met, they are better able to engage in complex decision-making. When their minds are overwhelmed with the fear of conflict, when the energies are high, they're not taking in the information that they need. But if I'm out bush with my parties and we're grounded in the sand, under the tree, in a place where they feel comfortable, it brings a sense of peace and a moment of calm that separates them from the high emotion of the conflict to a space where decisions become easier. We need to be able to design processes that maximize these things. We need to negotiate negotiate around what is flexible and what's not flexible, what is core to the needs of the parties in decision making, and perhaps what might not be core or what might be flexible. In fact, if we do this, we end up negotiating something unique to the dispute itself. There is no one size fits all. And of course, this kind of makes perfect sense when we remember that people are what drive conflict. And each of us bring our own fears, our own needs, our own cultures, languages, systems that all impact on how we respond and how we decide. It matters because when you negotiate process that has meaning, it also means that any agreement is more likely to have meaning for the parties. They're more likely to be invested in the outcome because they were active participants to the process. They themselves helped design this process. So they need it to work, because if it doesn't work, it's as much on them as it is on you as a mediator. This process becomes a living thing. And the agreement necessarily and also becomes a living thing. And if we think about our calling, our core drive as mediators and peacemakers, it isn't to agree to a piece of paper, but it is help parties reach a resolution and to be able to move forward. That is about living. That is about action and making it real. So how do we build those bridges? So I thought I would share some examples of how I do this, particularly in the cross-cultural setting, because I think for many people, sitting in a boardroom becomes something that we've got used to doing, or even sitting in a Zoom room. We're all getting used to this. But how do we do it when there's difference? How do we do it when what people need just doesn't fit this particularly Western way of doing mediation? When I go out to remote communities, one of the first things I do is I acknowledge the land on which I'm entering. And I do this in a way that isn't superficial, but really a deeply spiritual connection. It's acknowledging this place that I'm entering and taking the time to say, here I am. Help me be what I need to be in this space to help these people in conflict. I then take time to get to know the people on a one-to-one basis, trying to understand who are the right people to talk to, who has the right authority, and who are they and what are their experiences of what's going on. But it's not just me taking information from them. I want them to know me as a person, not just my qualifications, not just, hey, I'm an accredited mediator. I want them to know my humanity, because when they know an essence of that, it helps to foster trust. Yes, the qualifications and things build a picture of legitimacy, but it's not solely reliant on that. It is also reliant on the relationships that you're fostering. It occurs from our ability to really listen and go listen deeply. For me, it's also about giving people choice, because in these communities I work with, they're often disempowered. They're often given very few choices. There's just these white fellas that come in and say, this is what you're going to do. I always make sure I give people a choice around whether they want to work with me. Am I the right person or not? These are the little things that start to build the bridges. It makes them feel like they're able to influence, that they have some control in this decision-making process, that it's not been done to them, but rather they are part of that dance. I go where they are. If it's in their backyard, sitting around the back patio, I go and sit with them. If it's sitting in the sand under a tree in the corner of the community, that's where I go and sit. That's their place of strength, their place of comfort, their place of, in some instances, authority. That's where they can speak of these conflicts, not in a boardroom, not in the community centre, but on the country that they have authority to speak on. So if I'm building bridges, I have to also make space for that. This is creating formal and informal moments of connection. It's establishing common ground. And you know what? It's also about creating light moments, moments of joy and fun. Because when we're so heavily focused and overwhelmed with the negativity of conflict, it's very hard to see the light of the future. So my job as a mediator, as I'm building these bridges from the past looking forward, is to generate some of those light moments, generate some legitimacy. One of the things we always do is food. You know, in terms of that culture and those connections, food has this power to bind us. It's a sharing, it's the smells, it's the sensations that draw us together. We all need to nourish our bodies. We have different tastes, we have different expectations of that. But in making a communal space where we come together to all nourish our bodies, we are one step closer towards establishing some common ground. We are one step closer to bringing people under the tree. So how do we lean into the process of this as mediators particularly? As mediators, we need to refocus and adjust our mindset. Our focus becomes on how can we best help parties to move forward rather than on how do we get them to sign an agreement. It's a shift. As mediators, we are kind of surrendering ourselves to the possibilities that this agreement could look very different to what we think it might be, that this process might not be what we think it is, but we hold it with authority and respect. As mediators, we become deeply brave in our capacity to lean into the messiness of emotions, of culture, of norms that impact how people make decisions, not just what the decision is. We also become vulnerable. Creativity and negotiating process means handing a little control and influence over. But we balance this by owning authority of process once agreement of that process occurs. Because in their vulnerability, in their messiness of conflict, parties need us to do that. We are holding a safe space for them. We are making sure that space is safe but focused. We bring both stability and flexibility. And sometimes this means we're sitting at a boardroom table. And sometimes this means we're sitting in the sand under the tree. Sometimes it means we're sitting by the fire with the stars above us and we're just talking. But in the process of talking, it helps to create the clarity that people lacked in the heat of the conflict. And it is from clarity that solutions emerge. Our challenge is really, how can we do this in a way that enables those connections to grow? Not necessarily towards fixing the relationship, but certainly towards solutions that parties can live with. And that's my little presentation.
But Sarah, right now the challenge seems to be, how do I handle the kids while I still have to speak? How are you going to do that? That's the challenge we have to handle. I thought maybe Jawad will come in and we'll give you some time to go there, handle them and come back. So you totally
2 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. That'll be great.
I'll get Jawad until then. So Jawad, you did.
But I wish we could see him. He's so cute.
I know, but he's a little camera shy. Not that they're camera shy, I'm sure. But yes, the fact that she must be you. You're used to your mother talking on these webinars and meetings and everything, so you don't want to disturb. So, but you heard Sarah. So, of course, I mean, certain points, I think, yeah, you're back, Sarah. So, I mean, I was just thought maybe we'll get Jawad in, but of course, I have some points which I want to take forward because Jawad was not part of the Heart Soul Spirituality Symposium, because I mean, those elements I think are connected with what, I mean, of course, we spoke about it. So yes, but what was that conference or webinar that you were attending in the morning? What was that?
It was Sage. I can send the link to you that you might want to share. I'll just see if I can find it on my computer.
But this was
But
on,
it
on-
was. I
I
will
think
find it.
Aloysius Go would have organized that, right?
That's
Aloysius.
correct. Yeah.
but what was the topic?
I'm just pulling it up now so that I can share it with you.
Because I mean, you were inspired or whatever, you enjoyed it, so we should also watch it. Of course, I don't know whether I'm going to get a chance to watch it because I have 6 sessions today.
You've got too much on.
So maybe
Sarah, I'm really amazed at this man's energy and the way he keeps doing this.
Yeah.
It's amazing, really.
these are the things I need to hear, Javad. This is what that's why I was telling you. Say these things on the topic. We have lots of time for topics. But I think, look, Basera, you spoke about the bridge aspect of it, and I don't know whether you heard Ken's inaugural address. He also was speaking about the mediators being that bridge.
Yeah.
So definitely that is something that we have to discuss, and of course we are part of that. But the important thing is that under the tree, the flexible aspect, the informal aspect, the spiritual aspect, I think those are important discussions. And of course, I feel that now that we've gone online, that aspect has become a little easier. I just feel that now everyone's under the tree and under their own trees now.
That's
right. That comfort aspect definitely comes in from there. But what I'll do is, I mean, there are points which I would want to discuss in terms of obviously trusting the mediators, legislation aspect of it, and process part of it, and the Western way kind of thing. Those are important discussions, and there are sessions for that in the conference because I think all sessions finally get connected to that for me. It does, and you'll hear me. So I won't take too much time on that aspect, but I still feel that there has to be enough leeway given to people to create that comfort space for them, that you can't legislate that. The fact of them trusting the mediator should be left to them. It's their dispute, and of course that whole colonization, and I will bring it in some way or the other. But what we'll do is let's get Jawad's inputs and then we'll take it forward. Yeah, Jawad, you've heard Sarah. Did you hear her, or you were not listening?
No. I was listening to her. In between, I had to just quickly answer some emails. So perhaps I may have lost track of a brief part of it, but most of it I heard. So the metaphor of mediator being the bridge, of course, is something that really resonates with what mediation is all about. Now, the question that Vikram posed was, is legislation necessary? Is that the question, Vikram?
No, not really. I mean, I'm saying that will be discussed in a lot of sessions, so I won't take time under that. But the fact is that flexibility and getting people under the tree should not get affected by anything else. It is their dispute, their connection with the mediator, their connection with the space, their connection with the process. So, I mean, but I'm picking up from,
See, Vikram, I fully agree with that, because there cannot be any mediator worth his salt or her salt should know that the mediation process itself is something that evolves on its own as we go on with the mediation, because parties' needs might be different, where they come from, their emotions, everything. We have to keep adapting ourselves to that, and there cannot be a legislation or any kind of a rule saying that this is how the process of mediation should be conducted. Perhaps you may have a legislation saying that you have to go for mediation before you go to the court. Perhaps there may be a legislation to say that if you reach an agreement under mediation, that would be an enforceable one. So it is only those aspects, and what would be the maybe the standards that might be prescribed for what kind of qualifications the mediator may possess. But I don't think the process itself can be regulated in any, in any manner by any law or any legislation for that matter. That has to be a flexible process. It has to be left to the mediators. See, even when you train mediators, at least I make it a point to tell them that, okay, this is how the process is normally structured, but this is not a hard and fast rule. You have the full autonomy to decide based on how your experience is going to be in a particular mediation, depending on how the parties are responding to you, how they are, responding to the process itself. You have to keep evolving. So that is why I'm very uncomfortable when any of my colleagues tell them that this is exactly how you should do, or you should not do this, or you should not do that. I always tell them that you have to take the call. because it's up to you. You need to respond to the parties.
No.
Now, as long as because what Sarah was the most important point that Sarah was making was the connection that a mediator.
So Jawad has got frozen. So, but Basira, the aspect of listening and how, of course, listening to the heart and soul. How do we have to get there, listening to that part?
Yeah, look, listening to the heart of soul, I think, is a skill that we can't necessarily teach. I think that it's something that takes work and discipline. We have to do our work as mediators as well. When we listen to the heart and soul, I think it is that capacity of a mediator to ask a question that cuts kind of right to the heart of this problem that we're dealing with. And so when I say heart and soul, it's taking in all the information of the emotion, it's their needs, it's really getting to the depth of what is driving this conflict. And really proficient mediators, I think, have the capacity to identify those points in a way that doesn't make it unsafe for the parties, because we don't want to force them to be vulnerable if it compromises them, if it makes them unsafe with the other parties as well. So the heart and soul is you're juggling all these risks. You're listening very deeply to what is driving this, what do the parties need to be able to move forward.
But I think Jawad, you were frozen, so we are moving forward on that. But I just tell me, Sarah, from your experience, because again, we say Australia is a mature market. So now the comfort with mediation and people looking at it as their process and the informality of it, has that got affected over time? How
Look, so in Australia, we have national mediation standards, and those standards stipulate what's required of the mediation process. And there's been long ongoing debates around, can you actually codify the process or not? And should you or not? So what I do in my approach, particularly when I'm working with clients who have more diverse needs, is I'm very clear on where are my wriggle points. So what do I have to do to maintain my mediation standards? But where are the aspects that I can wriggle in or adjust or be flexible? Because particularly if you're mediating through court-referred cases or within the judicial system, there's a requirement for those agreements to meet the litmus test, in a sense, of legitimate decision-making according to law. So you're juggling those needs as well as the needs of the parties. So for mediators, I hate to say, I don't ever say that it has to look like this. What I say is you have to know the limitations of your capacity to drive this process, and you have to know what's flexible and what's not flexible.
So now the other question is, how do we bring people under the tree? How?
It is through, I think it's through the personal connections. It is through our capacity to connect with and engage with the people in conflict. We invite them to come into the tree. We make that tree feel safe and familiar. We give them some control. We give them some hope that a solution might be possible. We help them prepare to have a hard conversation. We help them gather the information they need to be able to be effective under that tree.
I'm now working on the backward thing. I'm starting with them starting under the tree. So connecting them with the process which they can do, they start at the grassroots level. So of course, village, I keep saying village, of course, village doesn't have to be just a village. It can be a community anywhere. It's not that, but the example of village, of course, is better for a country like India, where you have a 60% rural population. So, but that's not the connection. It's the fact that I keep saying identifying those people with the mediator mindset within that particular community or the village, and starting under the tree, which I think got lost somewhere, which of course to the extent of indigenous peoples in Australia, there is of course some part which is protected there. Of course, that is getting lost. So I'm thinking let's start from there, start under the tree and that part.
Well, you start with them under the tree, but you might be working cross-culturally where some of the other parties might not be comfortable under the tree. So you've got to blend and work that all out. And for instance, one of my cases was with a whole of community. and they'd been dealing with ongoing conflict, high conflict. And we sat down and we talked about, under the trees, I went to them and sat down with them and talked about, how do you usually make these hard decisions? What are the laws and protocols around your decision making, your conflict resolution from your cultural perspective? We came up with things around making sure there's men's space, making sure there's women's space, making sure that the space where we all came together held cultural authority, not just authority from a Western perspective. So we're negotiating all those aspects, mostly driven by them, because it's their conflict, right? I'm an outsider coming in. I have no authority over their process. I can bring my own and give some tips and ideas along the way, but ultimately they have to own and want to own and drive this process.
Well, I think, Sarah, what we have to do is we have to benefit from the discussions that you've had in Australia, because again, like I said, a more mature market in terms of mediation. So these discussions in relation to mediation legislation, which we're having a discussion on legislation, the only issue is that might be a time which might be a little late for you. We'll see. I don't know what time. We can fix another session. What I'm trying to say is that these are discussions which are important because for you, of course, you are part of it. So you don't realize that actually people can benefit from it all over the world. But this is something which I'm saying it's still developing, and I'm seeing it developing even in mature markets. We call them mature markets, but it's developing there.
There's so much change happening in our market as well,
because
and it's so interesting.
Because Selva was there, and Selva, of course, based in Australia, saying that people really don't really know about it or don't connect with it the way they should connect with it. So, of course, there is so much more to happen in the other markets. So, I'm still saying market. I should not say use the word market, which doesn't sound very nice for mediation. But that part of it, whatever other discussions you think we need to have, please, whatever, suggest the topics and we should do that. So but let me bring Jawad in. Jawad, are you still distracted with your email, or you want to come in? Is there something that you want to?
No, nothing much. I'm not distracted anymore. I just lost the connection in between.
Okay.
I think Sarah has absolutely hit the nail on the head. I think what is basically needed. I'm reading this very interesting book on social intelligence by Daniel Goleman. When you talk about connecting with the parties, your neural system is designed in such a way that empathy comes naturally to you. Okay, what he calls as primal empathy. That's something where you start feeling the way the other person is feeling. And it happens without even sometimes you realizing it. But social intelligence is all about recognizing what is happening to you. And then, developing the kind of attunement with the other party, with the person who's talking to you, and understanding and trying to, what he calls as the high road. The low road is what primal empathy is all about. Then there is the high road where you rise above that and you try to rationalize and you try to think about. So, and see how to deal with the situation. So it's a very interesting, actually, mediation, there's so much of learning in it that each time you listen to somebody, you relate it to when I was listening to Sarah, I was just going back to what I read about this. And I was just making that connection and seeing how these things can, possibly work in a real mediation scenario, where you're mediating a high conflict dispute, where emotions are very high and parties are, beset with their emotions, and how to, actually talk to them and help them to, overcome that and go past that into a problem solving or into a conflict resolution mode. So that's very interesting. Thank you, Sarah. It was quite a learning for me too.
One more learning that I will have to give you is because I also used to call her Sarah. Now I realize it's Sarah. Sarah, you have to tell us exactly how you want us to pronounce it.
Honestly, Sarah. I'm not precious about it. Here we say Sarah, Sarah. I take anything. I'm not precious about that. But I really appreciate, Vikram, the opportunity that you're providing for all of us to come together. And Joe, it's so lovely to meet you. And I'd love to keep these conversations going. And Vikram, you're helping us do that. And as a global profession, this is what makes us strive for excellence. This is what helps us be curious in our practice. And that's so exciting.
Yeah, because I think the important thing why I feel that all of us have to be part of the discussion is because I think that there are issues everywhere, which of course people did not think there are everywhere. They think this is our local issues or whatever. So one, we have a common aspect there. And then the direction that we want to take it, let it not be influenced by whatever has happened. Let's just say, okay, let's put it's there. I mean, things have happened, not a problem. Good things will be picked up, but let's all get together and take it in a direction which actually helps in not just developing mediation. Definitely mediation has to develop, but mediators. I keep saying that mediators and mediation, because if we delink the two, which I feel has got delinked, it's not going to be a long-term thing. So as a long-term thing, that part of it, that important discussion, and this important discussion, that bringing people under the tree, connecting with the people. If you don't connect with the people, where do you take mediation? What is the role of mediators? So for me, that trust in the process and the mediators will come with people actually connecting with it on a level which is might be different from what is happening now. I mean, so that's why the discussion from other parts of the world, I feel, are important. Yeah, Jawad.
By the way, Vikram, you always have a sort of a thing peeve against me that I don't agree with you on many things. On the development of mediation and mediator, I do agree with you.
Exactly. Good. Look, these are the advantages. I bring in at least.
I hope that sets things right to some extent. And Sarah, by the way, I also face the same problem. My name is Jawad. It's pronounced as Jawad. People calling me Javad or Jawad or whatever, I can bear. But when people change it totally to Javid, is something that, I find really unbearable. But I have learned to put up with it. I've developed a kind of stoicism when it comes to people pronouncing my name.
The thing with me is that, of course, people have a little bit of different perception, but I think that if it comes from the heart, you can call me anything you want. I'm okay with this. So I never actually correct anyone. There's not a problem. As long as it's a good kind of mention, it's not a problem. So, but I think still, Sarah, that I mean, your experiences with the indigenous communities, part of it, I think that is important, because I think they are under the tree. They are under the tree. One, keeping them under the tree. What has happened, what changes have happened in society, in there also, within those communities also. Look, urbanization, the fact that there is influence from a lot of factors, be it from movies or social media. So is it changing there? Because if it's changing there, that is something, a lesson for a lot of communities everywhere. So you have to tell us what changes you've seen there, and then that connection should not be lost, and what you have seen there in terms of people.
Yeah, look, there's so much changes happening all the time, and I just want to, I guess, be conscious that I don't speak with authority for the communities across Australia. I just can speak from my own observations, and that's an important political distinction here in Australia, because for so long, our First Nations people have been silenced and they've been represented by others. But I do see communities, well, certainly in Northern Territory, mediation, we were involved in a mediation project probably nearly 15, 20 years ago now. And what that did, it was a cross-cultural mediation exchange, and it gave the Yolngu people, particularly the Indigenous First Nations people there, glimpses into the language of mediation and what the process looked like. And us non-Indigenous people, we understood glimpses into their culture around what traditional dispute resolution looked like, felt like, was. And so what that then has done is it has created this really deep bridge around empowering them with language. So now they can negotiate much more effectively with government and corporations, because they have the tools to be able to allow the white fellas, in a way, to connect with language in a way that they weren't doing before. But because the Yolngu understand what that word means in their own cultural context, it has power and potency. So it's helping empower them in the negotiation process. I do see one of the big challenges, certainly in the native title space, is that this growing intra-conflict between clan groups, between different groups within cultural areas. And that becomes very difficult to navigate as an outsider if you're trying to negotiate a commercial agreement, a land use agreement, if you're a government coming in to try and get any sort of agreement, because it seems so chaotic. How do you know the right people? How do you deal with this conflict when they are all fighting internally, let alone making these big strategic decisions? And And I think that as Westerners, we forget that for so often, Indigenous people are being asked to make complex strategic decisions around high conflict issues that most ordinary Australians, non-Indigenous Australians, would never have to grapple with. And then we expect them to do it well, and we expect them to do it in a rational way. And I think that totally underestimates the pressure that we apply to them in these situations. And so I think there's been quite an certainly in Western Australia, Indigenous people are gathering expertise and professional skills and becoming lawyers and psychologists and recognising the impact of intergenerational trauma. So they themselves are becoming strong and empowered. What I feel sometimes is that in their empowerment, they are angry, and they have every right to be angry. And sometimes that's creating some barriers to negotiation because everyone gets tarnished as if you don't listen. But I think that's only natural. And I think that the process of empowering disempowered people takes time. And they deserve the chance to have authority and autonomy and make their own decisions. And my job as a non-Indigenous person is to, in a sense, educate the Western culture around, hey, this is sometimes what it takes to build a bridge. I don't and hold no authority in that cultural space, but I can influence the Westerners that I work with and around and say, hey, you need to listen differently. And hey, this is what it means to create connections with people. And you may not have all the answers, but at least give them the opportunity to be heard.
Because you know that on the 9th of August, we have that symposium on the fact of Indigenous peoples and mediation. So you're okay with that title? Because, yes. Okay, so that we are doing, and you're going to be bringing in people from Indigenous community. You're doing that. But because I'll tell you why I'm interested in the Indigenous peoples in general is because the changes that we will see there in terms of their own dispute resolution system changing is what has happened not just in, of course, Indigenous peoples, in communities everywhere. I mean, again, I will say villages, and when will I say villages? Obviously, communities. Those changing social changes that are happening will be more visible there for you because you're actually going to see it on a different level. So in that sense, if there is something you want to tell us that those changes in terms of their looking at dispute resolution and doing it, so something that you have seen there?
Look, I think that mediation itself feels somewhat familiar to communities in the way that the dispute resolution happens. And so in a sense, I think because there's almost a ceremonial aspect to what we do. So there's something that feels familiar to them around the decision-making process as opposed to going to court. So I think that connection for them with mediation, I think are increasingly seeing it as a way for them to influence decisions. And I think that's really exciting. So I think that their capacity to recognise its role in peacemaking is really exciting, and their uptake of it and their thirst to want to know more and to want to make it real for their communities. And particularly around those high conflict, entrenched conflicts, and trying to help navigate through those disputes.
Because why I'm saying the changes is because, of course, the community itself, I don't know how that is structured, but the urbanization aspect of changing societies, how is that affecting maybe say the younger people, their thought process towards dispute resolution? Because
look, I can relate to this notion of decision makers traditionally were the elders in the community. And so making sure the right people are in the room for decision-making in mediation. And when you're dealing with Indigenous peoples who have perhaps less connection to traditional cultures or traditional decision-making, we often see quite entrenched, particularly around family matters. So those that respect elders and traditional ways, and others that doesn't feel real for them, even though they hold their Indigenous identity strong and with pride. That there's tension. So there's tension between, in a sense, the old ways of decision making and these new ways where it's more self-focused and self-driven. So I think that one of their challenges really is, how do you navigate that as your own community evolves, or doesn't evolve but changes. And I think that there's tension points that we keep alert to.
Because why I'm saying that is important, because it is a part of that whole colonization, decolonization discussion also, because you are seeing it on, say, think of it as a little model. And these changes would have happened in general in communities when colonization took place. Of course, because we were not part of that, because a few hundred years back, things started changing. But I think for them, we might see those things right now. And when we talk about that whole conditioning of the mind and the changes that have happened there, I think it will also be an important aspect of the effects of colonization, and how do we undo that if we have to undo it. So I think that's why it's important.
Yeah, look, there's some fantastic people that I can't wait to bring to the table.
Yeah, but I think
if I may just add to that, see, that's the problem that we are facing even here, because we are now talking about, indigenous people like tribals who live in forests and all that, having being in conflict with the law, because laws are passed. See, this is indirectly, it's a consequence of colonization, but laws are passed, protecting certain things in the forests and all that, but that interferes with their rights, with their rights they have been enjoying for generations, for centuries, where they have lived off the forest. Now, what happens is they find themselves on the wrong side of the law, because the law declares their actions as illegitimate. Illegal. So that is where the problem comes. And that's where I think what Sarah is talking about is something which is very important for us to also do in the Indian context. See, there are some customs and ceremonies that they follow. For example, there is a particular tribe, I think it is in a state called Madhya Pradesh, where I don't exactly remember, but I read about this some time back, where at a particular time, they have a festival where the boys and girls just run away into the forest. And they spend time over there, and they come back. Okay, and once they, if any of them feels that, okay, this is the right person for me, they get married. Otherwise, they just go their own way. Now, there, what is happening is that sometimes, they are falling foul of this POCSO Act. We have prevention of sexual assault on children. That law is there. So they are falling foul of that act, and sometimes they don't even understand why they have been charged for these offenses, and why they are being punished, or why they are being incarcerated for that. So there are a whole lot of issues where I feel that the lessons that we can learn from you would perhaps help us in seeing how these conflicts can be resolved.
There's so much I could say, but I have participated in mediations and designed them, and I know of a couple of other people where what's actually happened is a negotiation of process. So it's a blending of Western law and traditional cultural systems to then negotiate those matters of, in a sense, cross-cultural law, and what this means, and how do we resolve this according to two systems of law. And it's fascinating work.
Let's just say hi to Tabitha, but Tabitha's run off. Tabitha, you can put your video off. You can say hi to us. And this is not in the entire mediation. Amsterdam is here, or only you are here. What's happening? So you might have to rename yourself. So
I will rename myself. Hi, I'm here.
Okay, Sarah is based in Australia. Jawad is in India, and of course, you heard some part of our discussion, definitely. But it was bringing people under the tree. So that was what we were talking about. So now, but this, I tell you, simple. I don't know, Jawad, if you read. Of course, no one reads my website also. But there's a symposium in August. It starts on 9th of August on this aspect of indigenous peoples and mediation, because everywhere in the world the same issue has come up. It's not something which is new to anyone. Only thing is not discussed in most parts of the world, maybe, So I think that's why that whole conversation is important, just for the fact that if whether we are going to just accept the, again I'm using the word, the whole colonization thing, because I'm not saying things have changed when the colonizer went away. The laws were the same laws, because obviously the colonizer was able to manage a whole country with a few people. So the laws it what was they were using. So that aspect of it, those laws, whether I am focusing on the mediation part, of course the larger discussion on laws and everything definitely people would have, because like I will, let me give you example. We have what our Indian Penal Code. Just a guess, I'm gonna ask you, maybe Sarah, what, when do you think that, what year is that Indian Penal Code? Just a guess. Now that I give you the background, you give
no
me
idea.
I've given you the background right now, Tabitha. You can also tell me. I've given the background to it, but any idea when our Indian Penal Code would be? Just give a guess.
Just
a guess.
Out of the prison system?
Just a guess of a year. Just put an year to it. Just put an year to it. Anything. Just, you won't believe this. And let me tell you, you won't believe this. I'm giving you so many hints.
No, you just tell me.
1860. 1860. Can you imagine? We're still living in that world. And when Jawad talks about one example he gives you, you find lots and lots of examples where things have changed everywhere in the world. In the colonizers' country itself, things have changed, but the colonized just stuck to things. So we have to have a larger discussion. But like I said, focused on mediation for me. Of course, people should have the larger discussion also, because our civil procedure code is 1908. I think sometime maybe people forgot we got independent some point of time, but we picked it up. So I think that's why this discussion is important. And of course, it's a whole discussion by itself. But at this point of time, do you think, Sarah, we should do the concluding part? Because
I think so. I'm probably going to go back to my kids, right?
Yeah. So how would you like to just generally the message?
Look, I obviously want to say thank you to you and to everyone that's been on here in the session live, but also those that are watching from around the world. I want to encourage mediators to have the courage to sit with and bring people with you under the tree in the boardroom, but in a way that values those connections. And in doing so, we enable and legitimize decision making in a way that's real and authentic, and it helps people move forward with a future focus. This is us living our values as peacemakers, not just following a process.
Absolutely. But Jawad, you've been part of the discussion. Anything that you want to conclude on?
No, I don't want to hold Sarah back anymore, and even I. So thank you for the opportunity, Vikram. I listening to Sarah, I learned a lot, and I feel that a lot of work needs to be done in India, and I wish to congratulate you for the kind of work that you're doing, because this kind of an interaction with people from different cultures, from different, in fact, different continents, different cultures, different countries, this is very important, because this is a field where I think we can learn from each other really and develop and grow. So this is coming from the heart. This is not a formal thank you, but really thanks a lot.
Okay. So what I take from that is all the others have been formal thank yous. This is the first one.
No, even first time I meant it, but you took it as a formal thank you. So I have to clarify this.
No, but Jawad, taking from there, the next discussion is also very interesting. They're talking about neurodiversity and mediation. I mean, there's so many aspects of mediation that need to be discussed. So I think that's why, and I keep telling people, please come out with topics. Please tell me topics. I'll create the slot. I'll risk my marriage. I will ask you all of you to mediate. I'll do all that. But please, we have to have the larger discussion because of that whole mediation vision 2026. So if we are moving in the same direction over the next 4 years now, at least we might see some changes somewhere. It's not going to be easy. I'm not saying 2026 is your goal or is this the place where we are going. We're going to take it to the next 5 years after that. But at least there should be some kind of a cohesive move that we have. And I think I have seen all the sessions, that symposium, last symposium and everything. I feel that we are on the same page. I think nothing that I think people have said that is different, but I think the collecting together of the thought process, and actually, I don't know, look, over time, are we going to be able to work as a collective to influence the governments to change things, whether we can reach that stage? Because I see that part of it has not really happened, because most people are doing other things. and are also mediators. So they don't take it as one movement. I think that part of it is also first getting them to be full-time mediators and then bringing together. And of course, what Ken puts out as the larger role of mediators, I think that aspect will also go forward from there. So thank you very much, both of you, to be able to come in. Of course, Tabitha, come in.
I would have loved to continue to listen to what Tabitha has to say, because neurodiversity is a matter of great interest to me. But unfortunately, I have to leave, but I will watch it on YouTube.
Okay. Perfect. So
I'm going to do the same, Tabitha. I've got 2 noisy kids that are hiding that I have to go and manage. And I
He's got rid of mine, so I understand. Yeah.
I can't wait to connect with you as well and hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Okay, so let me just cut the live stream.